everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Towards the Heights, That Catholic Girl. So, in my last episode, in my last video, I shared my whole story and journey of my faith walk and where I was to where I am now. And so, part of that um, faith walk journey was also me sharing a little bit about how I began my 8.5 year long journey of discerning a vocation to the religious life. So today I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into that 8.5 year long journey and where that all began of me discerning to become a nun and where I am now with that whole discernment. So let's get started. And today I'm going to be reading, sharing my story, but today I wanted to start off with a quote. I don't know who it's by, but I found it on the internet that says, I think it's from a saint actually, that says, sometimes God says yes, sometimes God says no, and sometimes he says, you got to be kidding me. So I honestly think that whole quote right there explains my entire discernment journey and my life, actually. Okay, so let's get started. So in 2009, before I turned 15 in June, I began to seriously discern my vocation and what really God was calling me to do with my life and what His will was for my life. Discerning God's will for my life and my vocation took a lot of growing in self-awareness, self-wisdom, self-discipline, self-knowledgement, and self-understanding, as well as self-formation, and a lot of prayer and silence and staying on guard and alert with all that was moving within and going on inside of my heart, mind, and spirit. God was pulling my heart towards and was little by little enlightening my mind, heart, and spirit about every vocation: the single life, the marriage life, consecrated single life, and the religious life. I was attracted to all of these vocations very strongly, especially towards the vocation of the single life, marriage, and the religious life. Mainly marriage and religious life, though. I knew and realized that I was, and very much am, at heart and in my spirit, a contemplative missionary. Simple, have simplicity, evangelical, theology, contemplative, active, and somewhat charismatic. And so I asked God to show me a clear sign of what He wanted me to do and the path that He wanted me to take in discerning my vocation, and to help me understand what my vocation was. After praying this prayer for a while, I began to feel a strong attraction and a very strong tug of the heart and call, as if I was specifically chosen by God to do something, whether my vocation was marriage or the religious life or whatever. But at this time, it was especially towards the religious life, and so began my discernment to the religious life. Yet marriage was still being shown to me as an option and a strong possibility as well. So where and how it all began. So even though from a very young age I knew what a religious sister looked like, and however I didn't know a whole lot or have a deep understanding about what one actually was or what a religious sister or a nun actually did. The reason why I knew what a religious sister looked like was because since I was little, I've been surrounded by nuns, like, since I was probably, 6, 7 years old, because, so my family, every year or every other year, would go to this fest in Wickliffe, Ohio, called the Fest, and there would be a bunch of Christian bands there. There'd be the sacrament of confession there being held by a ton of priests outside. There'd be games for kids. There'd be, but there'd also be an encouragement to vocations, and so there would be a lot of nuns from all over the place, really, and a lot of religious orders that would come and go and be at the fest, and just being really present to the young people and to people who were discerning a vocation. And so I would be seeing a lot of nuns walking around, and I'd be really excited. And um, it came into my mind one time when I was there, like, it's really funny. I just remember telling my mom, I don't know if she remembers this, but I remember telling my mom one of the times that we went there as a kid to the fest. I'm just like, yeah, I'm never going to become a nun, and I'm never going to discern that and everything. But God had a big surprise. If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Yeah. Anyway, so that's how I've been surrounded by nuns and knew what they looked like at a young age. More and more, though, God was attracting my heart towards the religious life and some of that vocation's general aspects, such as community life, the habit that they wear, spiritual motherhood, their life of sacrifice, prayer and penance and service, and the three vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, which, as I got older, I realized their vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience were actually the life of Christ, because he lived his life, because his whole life was one of poverty, chastity, and obedience. So they're living his life in their vows. Also, the fact and understanding that the religious life was a supernatural calling from God and a higher call to love. In all of this, though, marriage and having a family someday was always the alternative. One day in 2009, sometime before I was to turn 15, I remember sitting downstairs watching a movie in black and white. The movie had the main character as being a religious sister or a nun. And no, this movie was not the Sister Act. Okay, like literally, I remember visiting, years later, I remember visiting the Poor Clares in Cleveland, Ohio, where I'm from. And I was telling them about all of this, and that it began like feeling a desire to become a religious sister first came from, um, or that I remember came from me seeing this movie, and they're like, was it the Sister Act? Because I told them it was a movie that had the main character of a nun, and they're like, I hope it wasn't the Sister Act. And I'm like, no, it was not the Sister Act. It would be interesting if it was the Sister Act, like, because God has an interesting sense of humor. Anyway, as I was watching this movie, I, for the first time, started having a real semi-attraction to the religious life. A sudden thought came across my mind of, I wonder if I'm being called to become a nun. I didn't think much about it afterwards, and I wondered where that even came from. For as long as I can remember, the desire of my heart was always to be a wife and mother, and somebody who works with children, and most likely a teacher. Because I loved teaching, or just somebody who worked in a daycare center. In those two careers, I didn't work out. And I figured that if those two careers didn't work out, then I figured I'd be a masseuse or a spy. I could totally be a spy. Yeah. Anyway. One day in June of 2009, my mom and I were sitting in Pizza Hut talking about vocations and discernment. I had an inclination that she was going to tell me something about the religious life, and soon enough she opened up and told me that she thought that it would be a good idea for me and a good thing for me to at least discern the religious life more than I was doing. I told her that I didn't really think I wanted to become a nun or a religious sister, and that I felt like God was calling me either to the single life or to marriage. My mom told me that yes, I can serve God tremendously in marriage and in the single life, but that she really believed that I should look more into the religious life. I told her that I'd think about it. The more I daily read the lives of the saints, and through daily prayer, contemplation, meditation, attendance of Mass, daily receivance of the Eucharist, and frequent confessions or receiving the sacrament of reconciliation, and through the rosary, I fell more and more in love with God and with Jesus Christ Himself, as well as with my Catholic faith. And I understood that the greatest honor is to be servants of God, that we mustn't be ashamed or afraid to stand out, to be different, or to be set apart from those around us, in order for God's grace and love to work through us and for His glory to be shown, and so that He may bring excuse me, others to Himself through our own testimony, witness, and example. And it was as if Jesus gave all of the desires of my heart, especially that of being a wife and mother, to His own Mother Mary, and she transformed my natural desires into spiritual ones. Therefore, my heart was becoming more open to Jesus, and Jesus was able to slowly fulfill all the desires of my heart as a woman. The more I spent time in prayer, contemplation, and meditation, and the more I went to Mass, received the Eucharist, and read the lives of the saints, and just meditated on my own life story and how God was working in my life and within me, the more I became convinced, or the more I became convicted of my Catholic faith, and the more God and the Scriptures became real to me. Furthermore, I felt like there was so much more to life, and that God was wanting me and calling me to do and to be more, and to give myself to Him in a very unique, beautiful, radical, and great way. I just didn't specifically know what this more was, though. Slowly but deeply, I became more to understand, to be alert to, and to be aware of the kind of work that Jesus was doing within me, the kind of heart, mind, and spirit that He was forming inside of me, which was a missionary and servant's heart, mind, and spirit. And I became more aware of and alert to where He was pointing, guiding, and directing my heart towards, and to what He was wanting me to be open to, and the desire that He was helping me see inside myself and want for myself and others, which was to possibly become a religious sister. Side note, seriously speaking, when I go to grab my books on the lives of the saints to read, in which I'd actually lose awareness of what time it was because I'd be so engaged in what I was reading. I would literally have these specific interests and attractions of the heart towards saints who were either priests, religious sisters, nuns, martyrs, or those who were young. And so when I got my saint books out to read, I would just immediately flip to the saints who were either priests, nuns, religious, or young people. I was also being alert to what He was pouring into my heart and giving me as the desires of my heart, a thirst and zeal for souls, to not just be a mother, but a spiritual mother as well, to be a spouse of Christ, to be a missionary, and to even be a martyr in whatever way. Because I feel like as Christians, we're all called to be martyrs, like to risk even being hurt or made fun of or whatever by standing up for our faith, like dry martyrdom. We might not all have to like shed our blood by standing up for what we believe in, but we should all be willing to suffer at least something for our faith and what we are convicted of about our faith and what we believe as Christians and as Catholic Christians. All in all, the desire of my heart was to, and still is, to live a deep, beautiful, great, and radical life of prayer, sacrifice, self-denial, self-sacrifice, and service, and to give myself to Jesus in service to others, in whatever way, in whatever vocation He called me to, and to make myself a total and complete offering and gift of self to Him. Since I knew that marriage was still a holy option for me and still is, I decided to pray about both vocations together at this time. It was only by the grace of God that I began to pray specifically about the religious life and marriage together in general, in order to know and to understand the beauty and dignity of both vocations and their similarities. As I was in my room praying one day, I don't remember which day it was exactly, My heart was very uneasy and deep inside. And deep inside, I was having an interior struggle. I was asking God how I could possibly sacrifice, how I could possibly sacrifice the vocation of marriage and possibly be happy as a religious sister, as a nun, not having any children, since marriage and being a mom were such a great desires of my heart to begin with. And even though I knew that God too wasn't asking me to commit myself to anything, it's like just the possibility that He could be calling me, like at that time, just the possibility that, like down the road or whatever, that He could be calling me to the religious life, and to even like be willing to let go of my desire to be a wife and mother, like just it scared me. And it's like, well, how can you ask me to do something like that? I guess was my fear. I then heard a very soft and loud voice inside of me speaking to me and telling me not to be afraid, to have faith and hope in that if I was to become a religious sister, I will have many spiritual children. And if I open my heart's door more fully to Christ, and that He would be my spouse. I cried, hearing the voice of Christ within me, and surrendered to and accepted what was being said to me in prayer. Even though I didn't know what would come out of that surrender, and I didn't know what the future would hold, I didn't know why God was putting this on my heart, but I knew it was for a purpose and for a reason. But with His grace and with His strength and help, I surrendered to what He was putting on my heart at the time. A little while later, when I told my parents about what was going on, they were thrilled that I had a desire to become a religious sister and that I wanted to start following that push that God was putting on my heart, or that call to start to at least discern that vocation, and to start actively discerning that vocation, which entailed visiting orders online and or in person. Mainly a lot in person. Because you can tell a lot about an order online, but unless you actually visit them, spend time with sisters, spend time with their order, you can't truly know who they are and get to and have a sense of their charism or their way of life, or